This week, we're going to start diving into the exhaust for this whole build. We're going to route from the Texas Speed LS out the back. Everything's wildly tight, and I have some extra things like a valve muffler that are going to make it additionally hard. So, let's dive into this. All right, we're going to start off the exhaust at the front with the headers. So I've got some kind of generic shorty header stuff going on here because I know I have to cut them up to fit everything. There's not much space. A drive shaft has to go through here, and then this upper link tucks way up into here. So everything's super cozy. I started with this header. I reworked a couple angles on it to try to make it a little friendlier for this, and then I'm gonna have to transition from 3 to 2.5. I'm gonna have to do dual 2.5 because I really just can't fit anything else. But I've got this little angle guy. I'm gonna try to sneak past the bell housing here. And then once I finagle that to get fitted a little bit better, I'm gonna continue on and try to go through this area here. Then when I get the other side going, I'm hoping to be able to like sneak in front of the trans pan here and then line up under that other one. The whole goal for me is I want the exhaust tucked up out of the way. I don't want it to touch anything. I don't want it to drag on anything. I want it to be out of my head while I'm driving it. All right, so in making the exhaust on this thing, there's a lot of things to think about. On any car, there's a lot to think about, but on this especially, there's a lot of moving parts and very tight spaces. So I have everything mocked up, and I've played with everything at all the different ride heights, trying to see where a space is available. I didn't honestly leave myself many options for exhaust stuff. I wanted to do dual 3-inch, but it's just impossible. So dual 2.5 is where we're at, which should be fine for the power levels we're looking at. Just, you know, bigger's better. But you can see I have, from the headers, I had a cheap set of headers sitting around. I modified those a little bit to work. Then from there, I'm working on the downpipes. So this side, the passenger side, this upper link tucks way up into here and everything at full bump. So there's really nowhere to go but between the bell housing and the body, which has, you know, 2.5 inches of space. So it's basically touching either side. So I finagled it a bunch, got some clever bends going on, made as much space as I could, and it fits. So got that tube coming along, going back there where we're gonna get into some X-pipe and resonator action. But then once this side was figured out, I started on the driver's side, which I needed to throw the drive shaft in and check everything at full bump to make sure there's space for that. On top of it, there's transmission cooler fittings on this side of the trans, and I want to give myself options for running the lines to the cooler, as well as engine oil cooler block is right here. So I'm trying to make sure the exhaust is not too close to any of that stuff, especially stuff that spins. Try to make the best of what I can. Instead of doing that, and then by the time you have a V-band clamp on it, it's going to be hanging down here, or I can start working my way back up. Might have to move the V-band somewhere else down the tube, but I have anywhere in here really I can put it. So that's as much of a plan as I've got. If I cut it there-ish, which is directly above here, which will be like annoying to tack, but I'll pull this pipe off, cut that off there, and then we have in between here and there to start finagling.
Sounds like a plan.
Yes, sort of a plan. Bitch, come back. It's right next to you. Thanks. So put it on my angled front axle. Okay, tube. Now you see all this stuff is still just tacked, and that's why it's got a bunch of dopey Sharpie marks on here, because that's an easy way to simply mark across to get your rotation. So then I can put it over here on the bench, tack stuff, try it, put it back. It's a little easier than trying to do like the 1-foot flamingo action to tack things on the car while you're taking stuff. So that's why there's a bunch of marks all over it. But it's all just tacked in case whatever I'm doing here doesn't happen to work out, or I come up with a better idea by the time I get back there. I can cut it apart and start over. So a lot of doing this is just uninstalling, reinstalling, uninstalling, cutting, trimming, putting it back, cutting and trimming again. And that's why you haven't seen a ton of it, is because it's kind of the same thing over and over and over again. And it doesn't really make for great video. Well, I'll show you some of it.
Like right now.
Like right now, where I struggle with this V-band. So for all the exhaust, I'm using we have these UJ bends, so we sell them on ECS. This is, you know, half of one. It would have a 45 on here, but I've used it already. So they're really handy. They're nice mailer bent, 304 stainless. Makes it really nice to make whatever you need that isn't available off the shelf. And we have V-bands, but they're the nice V-bands that have the little piloting groove. So that way, you know, here's the recess in this one. They clip together and align so they stay centered, which makes installing it way easier. They stay sealed. They're not like shifting all over the place. So nice, easy stuff. These are all 304 stainless as well. So that's what I'm trying to utilize for all this exhaust. And it's working out great. That's what I've done on all the other builds too. So
What are you doing, Mike?
I'm playing make-believe with chunks of bend I've already cut that I have left over, just to kind of eyeball what my options are. I need space around this V-band so the clamp's not touching the floor or something. So I might move this down a little bit, cut the V-band off and move it over. But I like the way this bend flows with this bend. So put them in a similar place like that. I think it looks better. And then from over here, I want to go up. I don't want to come across. So if I can use a piece of bend, come up, then flip, come back down a little bit, figure out maybe the V-band right in between those, like that would be nice. Gives me plenty of space for a clamp. I'd really like it up a little higher though. But yeah, I'll probably just trim this V-band off, cut a couple pieces of bend here, and then start playing make-believe with those until inspiration strikes me and things look like they fit. So when you cut, you know, anywhere on a bend like this, you want to keep the center point in mind. So there's a center line radius of the tube, and then there's a middle of it, you know, that was bent around. You want to aim at that, so that way you're cutting the tube and leaving it round. If you were to cut this at some goofy angle, it's going to start to turn into kind of a teardrop, and then it's not going to fit the next piece you want to put on it. So I always try to keep that in mind, mark along, you know, that, along the bend, pointing at that center line point. All right, so I have the front half of the exhaust all welded up and finished out. So, you know, we've got both pipes coming through. It's parallel to the front of the pan from, you know, looking at it straight on and from underneath. Same with this way, the tubes are parallel lengthways and, you know, that ways with your fingies. And then where we left off was trying to finagle this bend situation here and fit a V-band that wasn't dangling down. So originally this was clocked and the V-band would have been like here, and I didn't want to bottom out on that. So I cut this off, spun it, and did some shenanigans, got the V-band tucked up quite a bit higher. So this is all finished welded. X-pipe to resonator is finished. I added a little hanger, drilled and tapped a hole here, and then welded a bolt up top. So all the front half of the exhaust is secured and on. Now we have the whole rest of it to do, which is equally, if not more, cozy. So we're gonna look at that. All right, for this project, it was pretty important to me to have some of the creature comforts as well as the off-road performance. And part of that, blend of luxury and performance is, in my opinion, a valved exhaust. So you can have nice quiet cruising and you can kind of have party mode when you want it. So I worked pretty hard at trying to fit one of our valve mufflers up here. I tried one of our off-the-shelf ones. I looked at a bunch of the different ones we offer, trying to see what would package well. This was close, but I did have to cut off the valve and reconfigure the inlets here. So I did that last night, which is tedious, but I did get it. You kind of have to thread the needle here between getting a tip through the bumper. As you can see, I have a bumper on here. I crudely cut near the tire. We're gonna get more into that on the next episode, but for now, I just cut the minimal amount to get the axle at bump so I can make sure I have space. So you can see here, it's not even a finger between the panhard bar and the exhaust, but everything is fully bumped out right now, so it's never gonna get any closer. And then we're very close to where the bump stop is and this portion of body, so I had to do a little whoop-de-doo up and over and then back down. So now we're on the other side of the axle. I have a space where I can put a V-band so I can get this thing in and out. And now we just have to thread the needle past this edge of the gas tank, which I'm gonna do some heat shield action later on, and then get back over to the resonator. So I'm starting to figure out that puzzle right now, doing some crafty bends to try to get really close to the link and try to give myself enough space near the tank. I know it looks close, it is close, but I'm gonna try to make a little heat shield after the fact on the exhaust itself. So I think we'll be in good shape as far as not doing bad things to the plastic tank. But now I can kind of work my way up here and then jog over to that V-band. Trying to leave myself space for the filler neck, so that's not seeing any real heat, as well as this plastic tank. All right, so I have the passenger side exhaust completed, like done except for a tip, and I'll figure that out later. But you already saw where the resonator was, and I just had to connect the dots to the muffler, which I reconfigured and got to fit. So it's not that simple. I had to kind of sneak around under this frame rail right next to the lower link here, pretty close to the plastic gas tank, which I'm not a big fan of. I'm gonna make a heat shield, and I'm gonna have to relocate its fill bung. Came up here, another little bend, kept everything nice and tight, everything's clear around it, and finish welded. So that fits, everything's good. You can bump it around, it doesn't whack anything, which is sweet. Now I just have to do the other side, which means I have to put a tube and I have to like come out here, do a whip-de-wop to get around, up, and then right here between the drive shaft is very tight. So I think I'm gonna massage some of this upper link mounting bracket away. Try to get a little more space so I can give the drive shaft some breathing room. Come up, sneak my way up into yonder, go across, and then muffler in the corner somehow. So that's as much of a plan as I have. First up, I'm gonna start with the muffler just like we did on this side, so I can start to configure that, hang it in the right spot, make sure it fits, and then connect the dots between the two places again. All right, so the rear muffler and honestly the full exhaust is done, so we're gonna do a bit of a recap and then show you what I did back there. We start up at the front. We did some V-bands on these weird headers I had, which I did a reducer on, so it goes from 3 to 2.5, and it's the same length of 3" on both sides, so the collector volume is the same from bank to bank, which does affect some things. But yeah, they both transition to 2.5 because that's all I could fit past things. This side gets very close to the bell housing, but it will move with it, so that's fine. And then comes down along this frame rail. I got this other driver's side tube to be parallel to the pan, both from the front and from the bottom. And then same with its friend over here. It's parallel above from the old finger test there. And then looking at it from underneath as well. Then we had to do some shenanigans to get over the trans cross member here. And I did some stuff to get the V-bands tucked up so I'm not bottoming out on them. because then they're hard to loosen again and, you know, cause leaks and stuff. So I've got that in, little X pipe here right into a resonator. I've got a little hanger here that bolts to the side of the frame rail. Then we've got the two, you know, resonator back tubes. Both are V-banded on. This side has to go between the link and the fuel tank. So I added this heat shield here to try to isolate it from the fuel tank. So this has got a pretty good air gap on it, and I've made little tabs on the end, bent them over so there's an air gap all around. And being stainless, that'll help quite a bit in terms of negating some of that heat transfer to the tank. So that made it up, over, and back through here. When it's at bump, everything looks like it's just really tight to the floor right now for no reason. But with the suspension fully compressed, this track bar here is like 1/8 of an inch from touching right here. It's like almost touching everything. So I had to reconfigure the valve stuff for this muffler. I had to move everything around so I could actually get it to clear. But that all works now. We have the valve stuff, so we can play luxury vehicle, and then we can play party mode, because, you know, why wouldn't you? That's the goal. And then this tube, I had to do some trimming on the upper link mount to give it some clearance. There's a little bit more I need to do when it's back down again, but I lost interest in doing that at the time. Then I had to do this little jog here to get it away from the U-joint, because at full bump, the U-joint gets right up next to the tube. This also gets very close to the tank here, so it's got a similar style of heat shield to what I made on that side, another chunk of 2.5 with an air gap. And when we come across, up behind the tank, over the track bar on this side, which there's quite a bit more space for, and out the back with the similar reconfigured valve. So that's the exhaust. Tips will come later. It's a finishing detail, but the hard part is done. And that left me with all the brackets and tabs on the frame are all figured out. All the rivet nuts are in. So that's one more thing off the list. Next week, we're gonna dive into all the finish welding on the chassis, try to paint all the underbody, and get it ready for finish assembly stuff. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. You can follow me at Mike the Day. We'll see you next week.